So excited for my first cat. Here we are live, amazing. So welcome, John. We have our next Diaca Day session, and today it is a cat-themed Diaca Day. Since John so kindly brought his kitty avatar along, I thought I would wear my new favorite jacket. So about these Diaca Day sessions, for anyone tuning in that's new to them, what we were trying to do was really just bring awareness to the DIAC movement. So DIAC means defensive acceleration and was a term coined by Vitalik in 2023 in his essay, My Techno-Optimism, which was a bit of a reaction to the EAC movement, or the pure accelerationist movement around technology. And the basic tenet was D standing for defensive, decentralized, democratic, and differential. And the idea being that essentially, like, let's accelerate technology, but do so in a way that is relatively safe and considers the worst possible outcomes as well. So we have John here today to talk about Ante and what he's doing there. Another very interesting builder in the space, and really excited to have you here, John. So welcome.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
And especially glad to welcome your amazing avatar. So Meow. Maybe just to kick off, you can tell me a little bit about what you're doing in the space, a little bit about Ante, and what brought you into this.
Sure, yeah. My name's John. I'm typically based in Seattle, but I've also been attending some of these pop-up cities and network states. I spent about a week at the original Zuzulu in Montenegro, and then since then, just kind of caught the bug and, been to Zoo Thailand, Switzerland, of course, earlier this year, and then a couple of the Edge cities. I'm right here at Edge City, Patagonia right now at the moment. And I work on a project called Ante, and we're a platform for on-chain commitments. And basically, we believe that one of the most transformative and socially impactful use cases of public ledgers, or blockchains basically, is the ability for anyone in the world to create credible commitments to others. And so we've been kind of exploring ways to make those important commitments easier to make and enforce on chain.
Amazing. I really love this idea. Maybe you can share like a couple of use cases that you have in mind when you think of on-chain commitments and why they're so important.
Yeah, for sure. I guess we could start off with our latest thing that we've been working on. So our latest commitment is one that we think is potentially one of the biggest commitments that most of us will make in our lives, which is if you think about like holding digital assets, and especially if you believe that they will continue to have value and be something that you might want to pass off, either if you lose your keys, or like if something happens to you, passing that off to a backup plan to pass the self-custodied assets onto someone else is something that we think is a really big commitment that many of us will make in our lives, and at this point isn't really well served by solutions that exist right now. So that's something that we're building right now. Ante V1 lets you kind of set up a simple way to have that backup plan for your self-custodied crypto. Other use cases that we've worked on in the past, we've built commitments for crypto nomads and network states, for a way for people to coordinate money towards making things happen. For example, we raised over $10,000 from various anons to make DeFi Llama plushies, and then also be able to claim them in a ZK privacy preserving way, so that you're an anon, you don't have to dox yourself picking up this DeFi Llama plushie. And then, of course, previous to that, we also started off actually originally with commitments for crypto organizations. So crypto organization can define some kind of on-chain commitment, like, we're not going to dump our token, or like we have enough assets to cover our borrows, put money behind those guarantees in a way that pays out on chain if those are violated. So these are all just kind of examples of commitments. At the end of the day, it's kind of like, in some ways, a conditional payment of sorts.
So yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, how do you think of commitments different to say crowdfunding, or so yeah, it sounds like it's just like a rule-based on-chain commitments.
Yeah, and they're all basically, we can now put these rules on chain. We can have this all happen, a lot in a large part for a lot of these use cases also without necessarily involving too many other middlemen, just allowing people to directly transact with each other. Now that we have blockchains, and so being able to then basically create this almost like rule engine of like conditions. We think that's kind of what we're looking at with these commitments.
Interesting. Yeah. I personally resonate a lot with the topic of inheritance and having a plan for that, especially with the on-chain assets, because it's something that I think like so many people have probably thought about at some point, but like haven't actually done anything about. And probably many know that it's something that could be quite awkward if it happened very unexpectedly. I think a lot of us in the space are relatively young and aren't thinking too heavily about these things, but probably should be. So feels on the defensive side of things. But maybe you can share a little like your take on DIAC, how you think about it, and yeah, also a little on where you see Ante in that world.
Yeah. So DIAC, I've read, of course, the talks papers on it. And the way, as I understand it, basically, we have this world full of dangers and problems, and technology can be and will be part of the solution. So we can't just kind of like degrowth our problems away. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we accelerate the technology in a way that continues to defend individual rights, privacy, the right to exit, and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we definitely keep in mind as we're developing these commitments, is that, while we're also, public ledgers are great for some things, but at the same time, like, we also want the privacy aspect of it, to be able to allow people to, to kind of fit in with this defensive philosophy. And so, for example, if we're talking about this, the example of the commitment of a handoff of crypto to your next of kin or whatnot. Obviously, that's something where like privacy is going to be something potentially very important there, because you don't want to like publicly broadcast that, oh yeah, I have some large sum of money that's going to be sent to this person. That's not a good thing. So that's something that we definitely are keeping in mind as we're building, and we are something that I think we think that it's possible to be able to eventually generate like ZK proofs that I have committed some amount of money to someone without having to reveal like who it is, and then potentially that's also something then that someone your recipient would be able to take and be like, hey, I have like proof that like someone has committed this amount of money to me, and then potentially use that as collateral for interesting DeFi things or other things like that. So I think there's a lot. I think the privacy aspect of DIAC, I think, is where I'm really most kind of resonates with me in a way that this is a way that's going to allow us to really take advantage of the power of technology and like gathering, like, using massive amounts of data or stuff like that, but at the same time, like preserving user privacy.
Yeah, that's a good mention, I feel, on the like capital commitments type thing towards like it reminds me of like the startup financing process, where often you kind of need to say, okay, we've got these and these commitments, and sort of to be able to prove that, you would need to almost give away the names a lot of the time to have any sort of resonance. And in this way you could really do it privately, where you actually have the proof of the commitment without giving away the name, which is a really cool potential use case. I love that.
Absolutely. There's a lot of information asymmetry that would, being able to do it privacy preserving is helpful. Also, in like since we started off a little bit more in kind of almost security adjacent space, like the whole like bug bounty process is also one of those things where it's like if you have like proof of exploit type things, then you can have the ability to like prove an exploit without having to reveal it, and kind of like losing all your bargaining power as a white hat.
Yeah. How did you personally come to be in the space of working on end-to-end commitments? What made you sort of go all in with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I previously, I had spent many years kind of ignoring what was going on in the space as kind of like a mere technological curiosity. And I think it was when Chris, the founder of Ante, basically came to me. I was picking my brain about some stuff, and I was like, "Oh, wait, there's actually a lot more interesting stuff to this." And yeah, I think it was just one of those things where I found myself just thinking about it every day after talking about it, and then yeah, then end of the week, I was like, you know what, let's give this a try. Like, if I don't try it, when will I ever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those problems that stick in your mind. Cool. Yeah. So, are you guys building open source, or are you like how are you doing things at the moment?
Yeah, we're generally building with the intent for open source. Right now, with Ante V1, most of the stuff that we're building is actually on top of open source safe contracts and modules. So, you know, that's already open source, publicly audited and battle tested. We did also build a custom deadman switch on chain to use to be able to handle the check-ins, and that will be open sourced once we get it properly audited and tested. And then the stuff that we've done in the past, that has generally been open source as well. You know, the front ends obviously less, not so much, but you know, I think that building open source, I think, is something that we're pretty aligned with and allows pretty much other people to also build on top of that base protocol.
Yeah. And so the reason I ask a little bit is we're thinking a lot about funding open source and how to get it right at Switzerland. And I'm kind of curious to understand how you guys are going about funding yourselves, if you're open to chat about it, and whether there was this consideration around which bits are open source or which can't be open source in order to raise money. Just like, have you had any like in-depth thinking about that drove decision making?
Yeah, well, so we've been fortunate enough to raise a modest amount from a good group of people that believe in our long-term vision, and you know, by staying lean and managing our finances as well, we've been able to keep the project running for the past few years.
Nice.
In terms of like whether or not open source like helps or hinders in that process, like I think that it's been a mix of whether or not they like or dislike open source. But at the end of the day, also, like, you want to find investors that are aligned with your long-term vision. So that just means that it's just one more way to like figure out who's actually on your team or not. And then I think that at the end of the day, also, like, open source is something that we think is not at odds with having a venture-backed project. At the end of the day, like, the usage of and belief in the power of on-chain commitments is going to be the most important factor in whether or not Ante succeeds or not. And so, you know, some of our most helpful supporters and early community members have been like huge open source contributors. So.
No, that's amazing to hear. You kind of hear differing experiences in that regard. Do you think that there's like a success factor in building open source where the VC check still makes sense and where it doesn't, or is it very case by case in your experience?
I think it probably is going to be a little case by case. Yeah, and I'm probably not as close to some of the fundraising stuff, but I think that it's going to be case by case.
Fair enough.
You know, obviously venture capital wants venture returns to some extent, but I think that there are ways for open source projects to also scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So switching it up a little, maybe keen to hear what in the ecosystem, if it was kind of anything that you were to change, or if you could sort of like wave a wand and that would be different, what that might be.
Yeah, let's see. In the ecosystem,
or the builder experience.
yeah, I guess, I mean, I wish I could wave a wand and just like speed along the development and adoption of all the programmable cryptography stuff that's going on, because that's just like super exciting. And you know, like
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I mean, just like, I don't know, I feel like every time I hear more about like what you can do with various forms of cryptography that allow you to, prove computation or like do things while preserving privacy,
Yeah.
compute over shared inputs, all that stuff. And there's like the world that is possible once you get those things like adopted in, financial rails and stuff like that is just like so much clearly a better world than man, like wish I could wave a wand, speed it along, speed the adoption of it along, speed like the tooling to make it easier for projects to integrate, stuff like that. And then other than that, I mean, I think also just better tooling around testing security is always a good thing in this space, given that we're still having, these huge hacks, even with projects that we thought were fairly lindy.
Yeah, indeed. I was speaking with someone recently and was sort of saying that, the smart contracts are one thing, but also we need to be aware of like all the Web 2 infrastructure that we're building on, and that may even be a bigger risk in some ways. What else? So maybe I'd be curious to hear a little about how you're thinking about the future, like what the development of Ante looks like, where you are right now, and where you want to be in a year.
Yeah, so Ante, I guess right now we're focused on this this problem of handing off your crypto. I guess and so there's a lot of things that we are thinking about and looking to build around that. Right now we have something that's live on Ethereum and Base mainnet, but eventually we think it also makes sense to potentially expand support for validator staked ETH and stuff like that. That is a little bit harder to hand off with just directly smart contracts. And so at that point, you're kind of talking like multi-party computation of like trustless secret transfer kind of stuff. But so some of that stuff is stuff we're building along with like the ZK proofs of commitments that we were talking about earlier. You are able to then, make these commitments and make them verifiable in a privacy preserving way.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I guess like, down the line in the future, the idea behind like committing your money to the next generation is also kind of in line with, in general, just like kind of monetary peace of mind. And that's something that I think there are a lot of things that can be done to improve that for people, to make people feel safe about their money.
Yeah, that's a huge space indeed. And like it feels like in traditional finance and in Web3, we're still a long way from being there in many areas. So I agree with you on accelerating many of these things. Maybe just to come back also to your point on privacy and the ZK and cryptography, what do you feel is the bottleneck to speeding things up? Is just like a lack of like a bottleneck around talent, or I'm curious on your thoughts there.
I don't know that it's bottleneck on talent. I mean, there are incredibly smart people working on these problems, and they're making like the progress that they've made over these years has also been incredible. Like, even just 2-3 years ago, like the idea of being able to generate some of these proofs on your phone was like not really thinkable. So I think if anything, there might be something to do around how to make this stuff understandable for people. Because whenever I talk to people, outside the space, and if I start for whatever reason talking about the ZK proofs and programmable cryptography, like they're always surprised to find out what is possible, but that's also something that they don't really know about. And then also just understanding how it works. And to be fair, like my math is not at the level where I understand what's going on with these. And so I think that makes it harder for people to trust it. And so I think getting people to know about and then getting people to trust the cryptography, I think, is probably the bottleneck there.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, there's definitely something that we would like to do more of. It's just like the content creation and education around some of these topics. I think this is definitely one of those things, but I agree with you that there could be a lot more of sort of awareness and just like layman's terms around what we're doing and why it's actually relevant to people's everyday lives, because the vast majority of people just don't spend a lot of time thinking about these things. Which like I kind of like I'm happy for them that they don't, because sometimes it's pretty intense. Yeah. Yeah, I guess a couple of last questions. So one would be, when you think about the DX space, like who is a builder in the space that you think is great, that you would like maybe to suggest for us to interview, or just want to shout them out? Yeah.
Oh, man, that's a really tough question. I don't know. I feel like there's so many cool builders in this space, and I feel like I'm just also inspired by all the people that I meet at these pop-up cities, building what they're building. Like you've already interviewed a whole bunch of them. Carol and Zug and Yusuf. The backup buddy thing I think is also really interesting. Yeah, so that's a really hard question.
Okay, no worries. If you think of it later, you can send it to me. But yeah, the other one would just be like, if there's any links or final messages that you'd like to share with the audience before we sign off, and just links where they can find you and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely, if people are interested in the latest crypto handoff product, ante.org. And then you can follow us on Twitter, Anti-Finance. We are currently, a couple of us are at Edge City, Patagonia. We're hosting a discussion around the handoff problem tomorrow at 3 p.m., I believe. And then we'll also be at DevConnect. We'll be speaking at the future, the Network States Hub.
Hey.
Yeah. So come find us.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to seeing you there. So definitely tune in if you're in Patagonia at the Edge thing. It sounds like a cool event. And otherwise, we're hosting the Future Cities and Hubs community hub at DevConnect, and John will be one of the speakers, so looking forward to that. And thank you, John, for coming and sharing about Ante. Really looking forward to seeing the project evolve, and hopefully have you back on here soon.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, ciao.
Ciao.